Pokemon. Pocket monsters. You gotta catch 'em all, as they say. But in the world of Pokemon, there are an abundance of creatures, and certainly not every one of them will be caught and cherished by a trainer. Some may stay wild, or fight fires, or become surrogate fathers to 10-year-old protagonists with hot moms. But is that the extent of their use in the Pokemon universe? Today, I'm going to solve the #1 most requested question I get in my Twitter mentions and emails and in skywriting above New York City. Today, I cannot do this. I can't do this. I can't do Pokemon edibility, Tara, because I literally said after the first episode, don't ask me to do this again. And the only reason we agreed to do more Unraveleds is because we specifically said I would never, ever, ever have to do Pokemon edibility, right? Like I can't reveal, like if I do this, there's no more worlds to conquer. This is it. This would have to be the final Unraveled.
Well, then I guess this is the final Unraveled.
Today, for my final Unraveled, I am ranking Pokemon by edibility. But can I first just say that this question is flawed? When people ask for an Unraveled on Pokemon edibility, it's always, can you rank Pokemon based on their edibility? Rank. No, I can't rank Pokemon on edibility because edibility is a Boolean function. Either something is fit for human consumption or it is not. Pizza is not more edible than salad. They're both just edible. So asking me to find the most edible Pokemon is a fallacy. There's no such thing as the most edible Pokemon. So don't try to find it. I'll stop complaining. I'm just saying that y'all are asking one question, but meaning another. So let's unravel what you actually mean by finding which Pokemon are fit for human consumption. And by the way, I'm not arguing the ethics of eating Pokemon. If you slice a sirloin from Mama Kangaskhan and fry it up while her baby watches, is that morally reprehensible? I don't know. And I don't have to, because apparently that question isn't important to you sickos. Kangaskhan meat is edible, and that's all there is to it. So let's talk about how we find this info. First, we start with a list of every Pokemon, including variations and regional forms, just in case a Pokemon is only edible in one specific state. Then we start finding equivalents in our world. This is easy enough for Pokemon like Miltank, which is just a big milky dog, but it becomes a bit more difficult with abominations like Aromatisse. What is that? A sexy bird? A piece of sentient cotton candy that started doing local burlesque shows? At this point, we must turn to the Pokedex to decide if we're free to chow down. This is also important for clarifying things like Execute, which might seem like a bunch of eggs, but according to the Pokedex, are actually seeds. In Aromatisse's case, the Pokedex says that its scent is so overpowering that unless a trainer happens to really enjoy the smell, he or she will have a hard time walking alongside it. Sadly, even this does not paint a clear enough picture on noshability, so it's time for the final step. Using my years of experience as both a gamer and human who has survived multiple encounters with dubious food to decide if I could eat that Pokemon. Aromatisse is basically an overpoweringly stinky owl. I could eat that. So Miltank, Aromatisse, Execute, and Kangaskhan are all edible, but that's just 4 of the 969 Pokemon. Considering how vast a task it would be to qualify the edibility of every one of them, I originally tried to disqualify entire types, like poison. But even that doesn't work. The problem is that when the Pokedex says poison, it sometimes means venom, and the difference between poisonous and venomous is extremely important in edibility. Here's a diagram to explain it. Basically, if you want to eat a king cobra, you'll not only have the easiest fun fact for any future icebreakers, but you'll also be fine so long as you cut off its head, which is where the venom glands are. But if you get a hankering to lick up on that tasty-looking golden poison frog, you're buying a one-way ticket to Ground Town. which is what I call the cemetery. What I'm saying is that if Pokemon can somehow differentiate between ground and rock type, they could have a poison and venom type. Anyway, here's all the poison types that are edible. Now let's talk about other ways to narrow this down, like the Ultra Beasts, who are beyond human understanding and probably not organic in nature, so it's pretty safe to say that they wouldn't be fit for human consumption. Similarly, the Steel in Steelix would most... Can I just say that the reason I never wanted to do this Unraveled is because it's so overdone? Like, if you Google eating Pokemon, you get 43 million search results. You could find hundreds of articles and videos and podcasts and wiki entries discussing Pokemon edibility, but no, you still insist on me doing it. Like, this isn't even research into things that have very little meaning. It's the research equivalent of a baking soda volcano. I'm not doing anything new, and that's a waste of both your and my time. Why do you even want to know the most edible Pokemon? You don't want to know that. You don't! Here's the list of every inedible Pokemon. It took me a couple days to run through my process for every one of them, but I'm glad I did because there were some interesting ones. Like how Slowking and Slowbro are both edible, but their Galarian counterparts are not. And the Porygons are one of the only normal types that are inedible because they're made of code. And I had originally thought that Reuniclus would be a nice jelly boba, but it turns out that if you drink the liquid surrounding it, it grants both wisdom and immediate death, making Reuniclus the Pokemon equivalent of a Tide Pod. On the other hand, roughly 3/4 of all Pokemon are edible, and I reiterate, this is not new knowledge. It's literally written into the games. Children used to have Appleton as a snack. Basculin are remarkably tasty and have often appeared on the dinner table. In Drompa's Pokedex, it says, if a child it has made friends with is bullied, it will find the bully's house and burn it to the ground. That doesn't have anything to do with edibility, but it is metal as hell. Also, you can still eat Drampa. But this still isn't what you asked me for. You wanted me to rank Pokemon by edibility, and the closest I can get to that is ranking Pokemon type by edibility based on the percentage of Pokemon that are edible and have that type. Poison is the least edible. Normal is the most edible. Wow! What a revelation! Who would have thought that normal things are good to eat and poisonous things are not? But that's not good enough for you, is it? Because you want a full ranking. You want to know the most edible Pokemon. But as I mentioned previously, that's impossible. And if, hypothetically, it was possible, I can promise you wouldn't want to know that. So maybe what you actually want me to rate is deliciousness. I wanted to find a baseline for something completely devoid of taste, like pure water. And surprisingly, that's not a water type, because most water types are delicious. From succulent Kinglers to light, flaky Magikarp to Palpitoad. So our baseline for completely devoid of taste is actually Castform, because its molecules were found to be just like water, which is another way of saying it's water. But let's talk about the worst and best tasting Pokemon, because no one cares about the middling ones. Pokemon type does help us a little in this regard, because we can assume that rock type Pokemon like Cranidos would be a little less texturally pleasant than, say, the fairy type Cleffa, which I want to stab with a stick and roast over a bonfire. Also, all normal / flying type Pokemon are basically the pheasants, turkeys, and chickens of this world, so they probably taste pretty good. Now, do I feel comfortable saying that Farfetch'd Nuggets would be the most delicious thing in the Pokemon universe? Yeah, I do. On the opposite side of the scale, we have the humanoid and hyper-intelligent Pokemon. And I'm not entirely convinced that Sawk isn't just a blue man that got separated from his group. A lot of our experience with food is how we conceptualize it, and sometimes a delicious food like haggis becomes less delicious when we think about what it is and where it came from. But that's getting a little too close to ethics for my liking, so just shut your eyes and chew that Alakazam meat. Oh, and speaking of Alakazam, there's a little loophole in this whole deliciousness thing. If an Alakazam trusts someone deeply, it'll let them have one of its spoons. And anything you eat with that spoon is apparently delicious. And if there's a spoon that makes anything delicious, what's the point of me ranking every Pokemon by deliciousness? Seriously, what's the fucking point? Which Pokemon are edible is not a novel concept. In fact, I'd be willing to bet that it's up there in the top 3 most theorized things about video games, alongside what's the real Zelda timeline and are Banjo and Kazooie married? By the way, they are, but it's purely for insurance purposes, and it's an open thing. And which Pokemon tastes the best isn't that much better. It's like the second step after your first deep thought about a video game. And the third step would be, what if the protagonist is actually in a coma and has been imagining the whole story? Guess what? You can say that about every fictional story because someone has imagined it. They're called the writer of the story. That's what fiction is. And what would you even do with the knowledge of the most edible Pokemon, right? Like, you can't uncrack that egg. If it's not most edible or most delicious, then what do you want to know? Like, maybe which Pokemon is the most calorically dense? All right, let's rank them by that. First off, let's define a calorie. It's the amount of energy needed to raise 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. Except when you're looking at most American food labels, it's a capital C calorie, which is actually a kilocalorie. And why do we call it a calorie as opposed to a kilocalorie like the rest of the world? Well, because if Americans have a chance to make something more confusing, they will take that chance. I know this because I'm American and I made this fucking series. So let's discuss how many calories are in the meat and leaves and goo of Pokemon. Once again, we consult the Pokedex, except the problem is that the Pokedex entries are bonkers. Literally every other Pokemon has a description that breaks the laws of physics. Pyroar is said to have a fiery breath of more than 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The surface of the sun is about 9,940 degrees Fahrenheit. This Pokemon has a fucking fusion reactor in its belly, and you're telling me I need to determine the caloric density of a Pyroar rump roast? What's the caloric value of the sun? Don't actually tell me, I don't care. And that's not even taking into account what happens after you eat it. If you serve your family Pyroar steaks as a special treat, you're gonna end up with a toilet experience that gets dramatized by HBO in 40 years. It's just so frustrating because the only reason I'm doing this Unraveled is because y'all won't stop asking me for it. I have actively avoided doing this for more than 2 years because it is a fool's errand. Pokemon edibility has been asked and answered so many times, and trying to find a clever angle or hot take, it's not gonna work. They ask me for the most edible Pokemon, but they know not what they ask. It's like, you remember back in the Castlevania Unraveled when I said that I originally had a cut that was an hour long and terribly boring, and then people still asked me to release it? Why? Why would you want that? After I specifically said that it was bad. I didn't even enjoy it, and you know I love to hear myself talk, right? Like you think you want it, like how you think you want the answer to Pokemon edibility, but you don't. Let me show you a clip of what you're missing from the unreleased Castlevania Unraveled. So Olrox's motivations, as described by the Castlevania wiki, are all about thrills and curiosity. And that's not evil, that's just fun. That's what you've been requesting for all these years. That's that thing. All right, you say you want to know the truth about the most edible Pokemon because it's gonna make you happy, but I know the truth and it hasn't made me happy. Shit. Haha. That was I didn't mean to say. I misspoke. I misspoke. That was didn't because I've spent the whole video talking about how it's impossible to know the most edible Pokemon. So it would be so I wouldn't know it. Okay, look. I do know the most edible Pokemon. I've known since before I started Unraveled. You see, I used to be a normal type person, like you. I was unburdened with the knowledge of video game lore. But then one day, I asked my friends an innocuous question. Do you think you can eat Pokemon? And they said, who cares? Pokemon aren't real. What a meaningless thing to ask. But I didn't think it was meaningless. And I wanted to prove them wrong, so I began researching. And the more I dug into the question, the more there was to discover. And suddenly, the question changed from, do you think you can eat Pokemon, to what is the most edible Pokemon? There was a shell of mystery surrounding it, and I wanted to break in and find the golden yolk of truth. I spent years learning everything I could about Pokemon from a gustatory standpoint, and at the end of this journey, I finally cracked it. I found the most edible Pokemon. And I told my friends, and they still didn't care. I thought having the answer was going to make me happy. That it was going to prove the worth of my quest, prove my worth, and show people that what I was doing had meaning. I cared so much about knowing the truth that I completely ignored how much fun I had finding it. Spoiler alert, Unraveled has never actually been about proving the answer to surreal questions. In fact, it's mostly about proving the opposite. Sometimes creators intentionally leave blank space, and it's fun to speculate what bizarre truths could fill that space. But it's less fun to carve those into canon. There are rarely, if ever, any foolproof answers to subjective questions like, what's the best Skyrim book? Or should we be allowing Brian to spend so much sponsor money on milk? And that's why it's so great to ask them. The joy I've gained from these Unravels has never been about the final answer. It's always been how I got there. And it might appear at the start that it's all a lot of research into things that have very little meaning, but no matter how small and niche and insignificant something might seem, the very act of researching or spending time with or caring for it imbues it with meaning to you and to the people you share it with. Except for my asshole friends. And that's why I'm so reluctant to tell you the most edible Pokemon. The best gift I can give you is the chance to search for yourself. But as this is my final Unraveled, I still have a contract to uphold. I will tell you the most edible Pokemon, but before I do, I want to give you a chance to pause this video and leave. Go now, and you can still have those fun arguments about how Psyduck would taste better than Slurpuff. Or you can stay, and we can be crushed under the unbending, immovable mass of truth. Together. I hoped you would have left, but I respect your decision. The truth must be revealed. The most edible Pokemon is Togepi. You can fry them up, boil them, make a nice souffle, crack them over rice, heck, you can even slurp them down raw. And that's not even counting the ways you can use them in baking cakes. Now, legally, you can't ask me to do this again. Just wanted to point that out. Legally.